Brut, New Art on Stage.
Welcome everybody to the 9th edition of The Art of Assembly, this time with the title Reassembling Institutions. This episode is based on a live event on October 30th, 2021 in Bergen, Norway, in the frame of Meteor Festival. My name is Florian Malzach. I'm hosting The Art of Assembly, which is a nomadic series of lectures and conversations conceived together with Brut Vienna and for this episode in cooperation with BIT Theatergaragen in Bergen, whom I'd like to thank very much, especially Caroline Sukkot and Sven Birkeland. I'm very happy to be joined by, in order of appearance, Nora Sternfeld, Ahmed Al-Nawas and Sarah Waterfeld from the collective Staub to Glitzer, Dust to Glitter. In The Art of Assembly, we look at the potential of assemblies in activism, art and politics. If you have missed past episodes, for example, the very last one with Judith Butler and Max Haven, you might want to check out our website, art-of-assembly.net, with a lot of videos, podcasts, and other material. And there you find also a newsletter if you want to subscribe. Today we look at a very specific aspect of our topic. We look at the role of institutions, specifically art institutions. And this is, of course, a very broad topic, which we will not cover, but we will maybe try to find our own way through it. And it's a topic which, of course, has been very viral, especially within the visual art, for example, as a genre of institutional critique. And I don't need to go into details of this, but just maybe just a few remarks as a reminder or a kind of backdrop of today's conversation, also to see what was the development before. So very roughly said, there was a first wave of institutional critique, meaning of artists dealing in their artistic work with their critique towards the institution that was in the 1960s, 70s with artists like Robert Smith and Daniel Boer and Hans Hake and others. And in a way, this wave defined itself often by a resistance or refusal towards the institution, by creating an outside and defining the artistic work outside of this institution. The second wave, since the late 1980s, with artists like Andrea Fraser and Fred Wilson, much more understood their institutional critique by looking at the role of the artist within the institution. So their feeling was a movement between an inside and an outside of the institution is no longer possible. The structures of the institution have become totally internalized, actually. So Andrea Fraser said famously, quote, "We are the institutions. It is because the institution is inside of us and we can't get outside of ourselves," end of quote. So in the first wave, so there was an idea of a distance, of a possible outside of an institution, and the second wave addressed the inevitable involvement within the institution. And then there came a maybe third wave, also called New Institutionalism, from around the year 2000, where actually new organization in the structure of art institutions kind of like changed the image, and alternative forms of institutional work were developed. And I would say that the Kunstenzentrums and Künstlerhäuser in Belgium, Germany, and so on also fit into this idea. So the new institution could be seen as an institution that internalized the critique already. As Andrea Fraser said, a shift from, quote, the critic of institutions to an institution of critique, end of quote. Institutional critique became an, quote, analytical tool, a method of political criticism, as Simon Sheikh put it. So the curators themselves somehow became critics of their own institutions, by, of course, being paid for that at the same time. Modes of production, presentation, and representations were being questioned by the institution itself, and formats like research, labs, and so on became part of the art institution. But at the same time, of course, the institutions were still part of a bigger representative power structure. So on one hand, there was symbolic integration of critique, but how much was it only superficially? there was a political integration of minorities and topics and so on, but how much was it at the same time just about maintaining social inequality? Institutional critique became a mechanism of control, also within new modes of governmentality, precisely through its very act of internalization. So it's an ambivalent shift. These new institutions created really big changes within the art field and in the relationship between institutions and artists. And I think a lot of them were or are very productive and very important. But at the same time, it made it also more difficult to unfold the critical potential of art. The assumption, in a way, from the institution is always, yeah, we know already what you're going to say, we thought of it already, we are already dealing with it. And I remember that, for example, Occupy Museum, a group from Occupy Wall Street in 2011, went to occupy the foyer of MoMA in New York. And when they were there, immediately the curators came and basically said, let's talk, and yes, what are your ideas? And they kind of, Occupy Museums kind of refused this offer because they said, but we know what you're going to say. We know that you're going to agree with us, but that doesn't change anything. So how do you change an institution that is already like preemptively saying, we agree with you, and yes, all the critique is deserved. So this is maybe the ambivalence of this. And I would say recently we can see a new momentum in institutions where the critique of power structures is even enhanced. And for example, even in some municipal theaters in Germany, the cities decided to hand over the directorship to collectives, for example, or there are finally more women, people of color, etc., entering these positions. But still, the question is this just an appeasement strategy, or is this bringing about real change? And what change, actually? And at the same time, from another side, more and more institutions, and not least art institutions, are under massive political financial pressure and fighting for survival. And also at the same time, there's already a backlash to these new institutionalisms in many countries. If you just look at Hungary, Poland, and you could name many others, where institutions are being redefined by right-wing governments and positions are given to people aligned with these ideologies. And this is not to point at these countries, but rather to say also this is part of a broader phenomenon and also visible in countries where maybe illiberal democracies are not being installed already. So today we maybe want not so much ask where are we now, but rather where do we go from here? Can institutions be driving forces of change, or are they doomed to be bastions of the status quo, capable only of slow reforms at best? What would it actually mean to imagine institutions in a radical democratic way? How can we understand museums, theaters, galleries, festivals, biennales as assemblies? Not only symbolically, but by consequently renegotiating their organizational structures. But also, what role does art play in this? What happens to the criteria of quality, for example? Is this still a necessary criteria, and how can we define it today? So I'm very happy to welcome as the first speaker, Nora Sternfeld, who is an art educator and curator. She's professor for art education at the HFBK in Hamburg, and she was from 2018 to 2020 documenta professor at the Kunsthochschule Kassel, and before that from 2012 to 2018 professor of curating and mediating art at Aalto University in Helsinki. In addition, she is co-director of the ECM Master Program for Exhibition Theory and Practice at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, and in the core team of Schnittpunkt Ausstellungstheorie und Praxis, and co-founder of and part of TAFOK, Office of Art Education and Critical Knowledge Production in Vienna. And since 2011, she's also part of Free Thought, platform for research, education and production in London. In this context, she was also one of the artistic directors of the Bergen Assembly in 2016, and is since 2020 Buck Fellow in Utrecht. She publishes on contemporary art, educational theory, exhibitions, politics of history, and anti-racism. And I'm very, very happy that you're here, and you're, of course, the perfect person to start off our conversation.
Thanks, Florian. It's really a pleasure to be here and to think together with Ahmed and Sarah. To come to, let's see if we come this step further that you ask us to come. Definitely not with the lecture, but the lecture can maybe be a starting point. So my lecture is called The Radical Democratic Museum, which I have been working on in the last years. It was nice that you were reminding us the history of institutional critique in museums and the situation that at some point in the 1990s and 2000s, the question was more and more important how the critique of the museum can have consequences in the museum, so that the museum itself would not only refer to it, not only collect institutional critique, but take it seriously in somehow. I will now propose the idea of a radical democratic museum, which means a museum that would not just assemble people sitting together in a circle, but take the conflict seriously. When I was here in Bergen as part of Free Thought, there was a very concrete conflict. Actually, the fire station was occupied by retired firemen. And what I propose is to take such conflict seriously, instead of being involved in a silencing process, to see what we can do together. For the Bergen Assembly, we decided to collaborate within the occupied fire station. We did the Museum of Burning Questions during the time of Bergen Assembly. And this was in somehow what Oliver Marat would call a pre-enactment. It was a collaborative imagination of what a Museum of Burning Questions in Bergen could be, in solidarity with the struggle of the retired firemen who already have been struggling before for a fire museum in Bergen. Now, it was a temporary alliance. We never wanted to collaborate forever. We thought that this struggle has started before we came. It will go on when we leave. During Bergen Assembly, we were told that there will be a fire museum. So I hope you can tell me after the lecture if this is still true or was just one of these things that are said during processes of institutional critique. In order to come to this concept of a radical democratic museum, I have been looking at how we talk about institutions since the 1950s, especially about the museum. And as you might know, there is since 1946, so right after the Second World War, there is an institution that is called ICOM that is connected to the UNESCO, that comes together in transnational meetings, assemblies since 1946, in order to discuss and define what a museum could be. Actually, they define not what it could be, they define what it is. And it's really interesting because as a museologist, I can tell you before 1946, this would not have been what museum would think a museum is. There was a clearly national self-definition, not very interested in transnational assemblies. But of course, after the Second World War and within the beginning of a new systemic transnational competition, it becomes interesting to come together. Of course, some countries came together within these ICOM assemblies, and they defined together what a museum is. This is now a transnational definition that sounds universal, which is of course not universal, and it also sounds like a definition that would have been there forever and would go on forever. It sounds so much like that between 1946 and 2019, nobody ever asked if this would not be a universal definition. Until 2019, everybody was sure who works in a museum, has an ICOM card, can enter in any other museum in the world, was sure that a museum is a non-profit permanent institution in the service of society and its development, open to the public, which acquires, conserves, researches, communicates, and exhibits the tangible and intangible heritage of humanity and its environment for the purposes of education, study, and enjoyment. It's a definition that clearly speaks to us from the emerging welfare state. I mean, of course, it was another definition in 1946. It changed a bit. And you can, under this link, look at the history of every little small change. And every change came out of this acknowledgement of these UNESCO-like assemblies. Now, I think this museum is not a radical democratic museum. It's very much a place that functions well in a certain capitalist welfare state understanding in a transnational world in which the US has a huge role, and where the museum is clearly a public institution and understands itself like this, but is not a place of conflict and not a place of change. Although in many years before that, when the Louvre, during the French Revolution, was actually taken over by the people, there was already a much more radical democratic understanding of the museum. So 2019, something happened. At the assembly of ICOM, already before was 2007. It all started in 2007. So the last time that this definition was actually decided for was 2007, and already some of the people were pretty unhappy with this definition. They were like, no, this is not about what we have to discuss today. And they started to organize themselves to come to another definition that then was presented at the assembly in 2019. So since 2019, there is... actually, I tell you already now, there is no definition because this definition did not go through. But at the assembly, they proposed museums are democratizing inclusive and polyphonic spaces for critical dialogue about the pasts and the futures, acknowledging and addressing the conflicts and challenges of the present. They hold artifacts and specimens in trust for society, safeguard diverse memories for future generations, and guarantee equal rights and equal access to heritage for all people. Museums are not for profit. They are participatory and transparent and work in active partnership with and for diverse communities to collect, preserve, research, interpret, exhibit, and enhance understandings of the world, aiming to contribute to human dignity and social justice, global equality, and planetary well-being. Okay, some people were working on this really hard and also were fighting for it. But it did not go through because I think especially the French ICOM members said, look, it's very nice what you did. We understand that this is what you want. It's a mission, but it's not a definition. So we really don't understand what is going on here. We do definitions, but you propose something that you propose it with your, like, let's say, with the neoliberal means of the 21st century. This is my criticism. And I mean, they just want to stay with their French colonial universalism. They think this is not a universal definition, so they don't vote for it. But what I think is that this is not a way to come to a radical democratic museum. You cannot sit there like in a mission committee team, assemble and say, okay, now let's say, where do we want to be in 2030? And then everybody puts some words in, and then you put these words together, and then you make this amazing definition that has all the keywords in it. And then you say, this is what a museum is. And everybody knows that this is not what a museum is. Actually, I think if this, I'm personally happy that this did not go through. Because if it would just be one more huge institutional lie that teaches us to accept that what institutions say they do is not what they actually do. And that's why I think we are in a good situation, in an actually good situation, in an interregnum, because nobody believes in the old definition anymore, and the new definition did also not go through. So now we really don't know what the museum is. This is a good moment for the para-museum. And what I call the para-museum, I think the Louvre was actually a para-museum. It took over the museum of, it took over the place where the place of representation of the nobles, and took it away, also reappropriated the things, and changed their value completely, and changed their the ownership, changed the ownership completely, because the ownership was then the ownership of everyone. And this is a para institution, an institution that is able to take over and revalorize the value, to take over and change the meaning of what is there. So this is actually what we could demand from the museum to be. This is how I would define the museum. But para-museums are also something that many artists did in the last year and these years. And this is interesting also in relation to the history that Florian was telling us, because while in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, artists thought when they did artworks in relation to museums, very often called the museum a mausoleum, a dead place, a place of petrification, uninteresting, terribly boring, and something to go away from. But in the 21st century, they start to be interested in museums. They build museums all over the place. This is the very well-known project of Kader Attia, where he is collecting things that are repaired and undermining the logics of colonial divisions. This is Meshak Gaba Museums of Contemporary African Art. This is Voluspa Kapa, the Hegemony Museum at the Venice Biennial 2019, together with the Subaltern Portrait Gallery. And I have gathered many, many more examples. Artists became interested in appropriating the idea of the museum. It could be because neoliberalism has made it so difficult to imagine something that would remain after we die, that museums become interesting, to claim a context that would remain, to claim a context in which we can actually assemble to discuss what happened in the past, what it means for us today, and how we can, when we know that, imagine another future, becomes interesting, because a context like that almost melted with these all the time changing trends and social media logics and so on. So this is why, instead of believing all too much in this mission statement way of the new proposition for the ICOM definition, I decided to use the older one, the one from the 50s, in a para-institutional way, and to take it very seriously, and to read it so seriously that from within could come a para-museum program that would be, I think, related to Florian's understanding of the assembly, not as a place where people just sit together, but as a place where we imagine the world differently. And in this, in order to do this, I took the main parts of each of these definitions, actually, also the new one, which is collecting, arranging in space, organizing publics, producing knowledge, research, and education. And I turned it in these 5 parts of the program. Challenging the archive, reappropriating space, organizing counterpublics, producing alternative knowledges, and radicalizing education. So I propose that this is what a museum should do. This is actually not the definition. My definition would be a museum is a place where things and people come together in order to understand what happened, to discuss and fight about what it means today in order to imagine another possible future. And if this would actually be the definition of the museum, this would not be a Western concept. I learned that from Bonaventure and Kung. So this would be my definition. This is my program that I propose for you for the museum as a radical democratic institution. And in order to understand my own program, I have gathered in the last 10 years many examples from art practices, activist practices, and so on. And we will just quickly go through some images. So the first one is challenging the archive. Under it, we could find strategies of unsettling the powerful histories, of assembling material differently, strategies of talking back against the hegemonic narrative and canon, and actualizing the unarchivable. I think that Kader Attia is doing this in somehow, this actualizing the unarchivable. And the unarchivable would be the struggle that is actually not, it was never the idea when the order of things was established to bring the struggle in, but it's there nevertheless. And I propose that this is actually what the museum should be about, to relate, to actualize these moments of conflict that are in the archive, even though they are not archived deliberately. And Kader Attia is doing such a project when he here for the Documenta in 2012 showed things and showed objects and images referring to things and people who have been damaged and repaired during the First World War. Yeah, then I have many other examples of unsettling the archive. Here, Doreen Mende, Double Bound Economy is a project that shows the capitalist imaginary of GDR photographs of the fair, of the GDR fair. And many other things much more complicated than that, but I cannot unsettle it too much now because we don't have the time. React Feminism is a performing archive. You might know it, very interesting project on the history of feminist performance. And the question of how, actually also my question, if the idea is to actualize the history of struggle, if this is what this would be about, how can we be faithful to the history? Is it to look at the documentary video of a performance? Is it to perform it again? Is it to discuss what it means? Is it to do something completely different in relation to it? How do we actually refer to the politicality of the history of feminist performance? This was the question of this project. Okay, many others. Reappropriating space is the second one. Here I have embattled places, interspaces, and contact zones, but it's not so much our thing today, I think. Organizing counterpublics is more interesting for us. Because this is this is in somehow what we want to do. And this is where assembling is not only to sit together. The question is, how can we organize ourselves? And in the last years, we have seen really interesting projects, and I think the two of you will talk about them, that are about more than just coming together. It's about commoning the commons. It's about coming back to this idea maybe also of the Louvre, to take back the commons from the capitalized neoliberal idea of the public, but also not only on the level of representation, but on a very structural level. So thinking about a different organization, thinking about reorganizing structures and sharing surplus values. This is, I think, what Ruan Grupper proposes, not only with the next Documenta, but with their whole project in Jakarta, with Good School and their whole ecosystem. What they propose is to enter the system in order to work in it with other economies. And I think you will also talk about this a bit, with the whole problematic that comes with it. Questions of self-organization, questions of critique as practice, and not only is critique something to collect? Is it something that we can be faithful to? Is it a lie? No, how can we actually work on it as a practice? and this comes together with assemblies and hospitalities. I just show you very quickly some pictures about that have been done by the artist Isa Rosenberger. I worked with her also here in Bergen about the Museum of Impossible Forms that Ahmed Al-Nawas has founded together with Christopher Wessels in the beginning. And he is here and he will talk about this and other project that he's in the moment involved in. So I just quickly show the pictures and then I show Ruan Gruppa. Yeah, Ruan Gruppa is a collective of artists who have they founded this thing. Ruan Gruppa actually means space group. They founded themselves as a space group in Jakarta in 2000. And from the very beginning, their idea was to be in spaces and share spaces and create collectivities that would always become broader, become blurred, and with strategies of creating alternative economies in which surplus value is produced and then shared in very unexpected ways. And it's absolutely not done in a critical way. So they would not say to Documenta, or to any other context in which they are, we want to criticize your German way to do something. In the very contrary, they would enter the logic and try to understand it and work with it differently. One example of the last weeks is that there is an ongoing thing with the artist list of Documenta. I don't know if you know that, but everybody in the art market always wants to know who will be at the next Documenta. And usually the economic logic says to the artistic directors not to make the artist list public before the last day. Nobody has to know it, because if nobody knows it, then the market can, function in its own way. What did Ruan Gruppa do? They worked together with the local, it's also very important, from Hessia, the state of Hessia, the local magazine of homeless people, and asked them if it would be okay for them 3 weeks ago to publicize the list of artists. So, of course, it was okay for them. It was a collaboration. They did it. And yeah, if you wanted to know it, you had to buy the Homeless People magazine. And from there, it became public very early. And it was only the first list. There will be another one. And you will always have to buy the Homeless People magazine. So this is just one of many examples. Another example is the fact that they actually organize the artists, most of them collectives, in groups, so that when money comes in, for example, national money or money from a gallery, they will never know if they really gave it to the person from their nation, because they work in groups. So the way how this money is actually spent and decided is part of a collective process. Another one, Fridericianum, the main space of Documenta, will be a dormitory. So this is a clear, beside the fact that it will be a school also, as they say, or something, a place of learning and unlearning. But this is also an intervention in the tourist economy of the small town of Kassel, where they can really take for a bed 200, 300, 400 euros during the time of Documenta. So to create very cheap sleeping places is another kind of intervention. Okay, so you see, it's not only critique, it's trying to enter, to reappropriate the institution. And I think here I end because I talked far too long.
Thank you, Nora, very much. And our next speaker is Ahmed Al-Nawas. He is an art worker based in Helsinki, and his practice is focused on collaborative knowledge production and content building. And his recent collaborative project, Fake Star, with the artist Minna Henriksen, was exhibited in 2020 at Turku Art Museum. And he created the Checkpoint Helsinki's public program series, Remembering Silences, in 2015 and 16. And he has been a co-founder of 2 art spaces in Helsinki, Third Space and Museum of Impossible Forms. And I guess you will have a complex view on what assemblies and collective work in art institutions are about.
It was quite difficult for me to talk about projects that I'm not anymore. I was a co-founder, quite a key figure in co-founding them, but I'm not anymore involved in them. And immediately I know, for the ones who will see the video, colleagues, I'm not talking on your behalf. This is what I'm going to present. It's an autobiography, that text that I wrote 2017 when I was still involved in the Museum of Impossible Forms in a quite a crucial way. This text is not published. So, and it's my own version. And in this text, I will try to touch upon a lot of things that both Nora already talked about and Florian, from an experience, one of the first experiences I had when I was a student. So let's see what happens. I never read it aloud. So I was still an art student back then when I attended the first meeting. We sat on a cold, dirty vinyl floor in an empty 10 square meter brick and mortar space. I did not know anyone from the 5 attenders, except my South African new friend Christopher Vassels. He was my sparring partner at Professor Nora Sternfeld's discursive class. We both studied in Aalto University, where Nora was teaching at the time. The two of us would often hijack the classroom by extensive critical debates around post-coloniality and the problems of art institutions. After one of these classes, back in 2012, Christopher invited me to join the formation of Undefined Space. His Mexican classmate has managed to rent a tiny shop space in the heart of Helsinki Design District, 10 square meters. What a magnificent achievement, I thought. Renting any space, despite having the money for it, in an xenophobic and structurally racist environment is a long struggle for someone like us, precarious non-white immigrants. After a short introduction round, it became inevitable that everyone in the meeting shared similar interests. At the time, I believed that equality is acquired and not given by an institution. I saw this call as an opportunity to engage by doing, which I found necessary to accompany the already existing critical discourse offered by colleagues and activists. I felt as if it was a time to finally test all that radical and critical theory, which Florian mentioned, which was studied and kept repeated in endless biennales and art talks. Along with my political desire, I also had a personal ambition. I dreamed about a space where I could practice and form a career without taking the offered position of entrepreneurship, nor losing the level of autonomy in working for an institution, nor having to rely on a patronage, running after private funders. Beside desires, we also shared necessity, and we acted out of this necessity. As immigrants and border people, queer people who also joined the group later on, and we lacked equal access to the Finnish art scene. The necessity was to rethink the elitism being nurtured by the gallery system, the need to be independent but still engage at the and then also the need to have a space where failure is embraced and as a counter-normative action. The necessity to interrogate why there is a disproportionate absence of non-white, queer and feminist art and artists in the Finnish art scene. I'm talking about 2012. Now before, let's say, Black Lives Matters movement became internationally known. It was a moment where populism was quite high in Finnish context. It was before the 2015 flow of refugees, so it was a moment where everything was quite silent when a post-colonial or a feminist and Me Too was not still so popular. So it was this moment at that time. And also the necessity to reject the narrow multiculti option offered by institutions as a solution to our marginality. And the necessity to create what Oakway Enweiser calls parallel economy of production, as opposed to alternative spaces. Therefore, choosing the notion of third space as a theoretical framework and name for our collective was, at least for me, a logical attempt born out of agitation against the reproduction of classificatory categories and essentialist thinking. We wanted to invent space that initiate new signs of identity and innovative sites of collaboration and contestation. Or, as Christopher Wassels calls it, a space for radical openness. Laclau and Moff would call it radical democracy. Wassels drew his idea from bell hooks, from her book, The Margins, From the Margin to the Center, Feminist Theory. For Hooks, spaces that act as a community for resistance are necessary to push against oppressive boundaries set by race, sex, and class domination. Instead of forming another artist-run gallery, our first meeting impulsively ended up creating a radical art project. We understood that our surviving depends on our ability to conceptualize parallels. So, to seek new knowledges and experiences, one needs to abandon the existing models. To organize meant to improvise. We divided rent and maintenance cost among ourselves. Remember, it's 10 square meters, so it's not that expensive yet, but expensive, I mean, for students, but we are now at that time 6. To organize, we divided the cost and the maintenance, and through the forces of love and guilt, we managed to unstructurally administrate logistical and technical tasks through monthly rotations and voluntary sign-ups. With a minimal predetermined set of orders, each member took responsibility for their own curatorial projects. And since we were students at Aalto University, we had the right to loan technical equipment, and we took advantage of it. The benches that we had in the space were from the university, the projectors, the sound system, and even sometimes toilet papers. I mean, often, not sometimes. Such a collectivity allowed us sovereignty and the privilege of autonomy. Meanwhile, our position of radical openness became a tool for a political agitation. We radicalized our curatorial strategy by refusing to reproduce the Finnish art scene structure. We offered the space to artists without asking for rent. Our curatorial choices aimed to dealing from what we thought is an appealing, creative, or innovative and non-harming art. We didn't want to do that. We chose to work with mainly precarious colleagues whose artistic medium and content locates at the margins. I knew that locating ourselves at the margins is necessary, but never thought that it would be so emotionally demanding. It turned out that being in such a marginal position did not automatically mean that all collective members share similar strategies to counter the existing alienation. Also, with practice, it became clear that handling the demands of running space for radical openness with an improvised structure might lead to an inequality in the division of labor. Conflict over who cleans the space, for example, might reveal the hidden hierarchy inside the collective. Finding a suitable form for such a pluralistic and non-hierarchical groups meant that we had to engage eternally in eternal contestation on what the collective is about, what unites us, who suffers the most, and who should we and how should we reorganize. Such debate recurred every time we had to take a collective decision. Imagine, every time. So we're talking about now almost every second day. Often such debates could be exclusive, but transformative as well. Do not mistake the margin as a safe place, as a and as Hooks say, locating oneself, locating oneself in the margin. There is a difficult, it's difficult but yet necessary. I knew that locating ourselves at the margins is necessary, but never thought that it would be so emotionally demanding. Yeah, I said that before. So, after 2 years of my experience in third space, all members at that time, after 2 years, agreed and understood that we need to go forward. But again, we couldn't come into terms what we mean by forward. Which direction is forward? Is it institutionalizing or keeping the same structure, which is unstructured? Is it to become more professional in sense of keeping a gallery, or radicalize it more? This experience, my experience in third space, was crucial for me in theorizing, along with Christopher Vassels, the grounds for the second experiment. Some of us, I have to admit, I was lobbying for a change. So I kind of wanted to take Bell Hooks' idea of the margins as the center, like literally. I wanted to go into exile. I wanted that we take this place into the margins, go to the suburb and experiment ourselves there. By going into exile, then our understanding of art and what we do will change, because it's not anymore in this kind of a very understandable, tolerating space. We have to think about our project again. So, I think what I learned from the dynamics, from the dynamics within the assembly in third space, the decision-making process, the contact zone idea, or also the space of constant defining and reconstructing who we are and what we do, and the process of change and interruption, recoding of normative values that we kind of, that these are the contents that we wanted to work in the exhibition and also in whatever we did for the audience, was very necessary and very crucial for me at that time. And I think this what happens behind doors in such spaces are, from my understanding, is more worth reflecting on rather than just focusing on the exhibition that this kind of spaces make, or the public program that appears to the outside. I think this constant conflicts and also coming together that happening behind doors are very, very, it's the thing that makes this, like, what makes this experiment important, I think. And how to reflect this process of this process in what you do for the public, without reproducing a social porno. What I'm afraid of in Kassel, but I think the collective there is quite clever, is not having a social porno. Is it social porno called? I think it's called social porno. It's kind of like a reality TV. I don't want to see a reality TV or like kind of reenacting assemblies. That's not the thing. Yeah, I understand, but this was also my concern, like when we were thinking about having a space where our experience in third space, this backstage experience, will be the experience of every project we do with every collaborative like a group or member or community. We wanted literally to locate the margins as the center. It needs to take us out of our elitist bubble and help us unlearn our privilege as while we're doing it. We need to rethink the margins as the center and move forward toward the conception. And of course, it was very clear from the beginning that it will be a place for post-colonial and feminist theory, decoloniality, and queer. So we founded something along with other members of Third Space who decided to come with us. We founded something which we call the Museum of Impossible Forms. Now, it contains two phenomena or structures that contradict each other. In other words, it's an antithesis. Antithesis, right? Museum, as Nora was discussing, the historical structure that it brings with it, and institutions that is known for colonial practices, for involved in colonialism or as a tool of colonialism, classification, appropriation, and now with the current structure, later nationalism, of course, and today it's also, it contains the kind of, if you look at the critically, the museum contains also link to dirty money, money laundering, tax havens, etc. So it's kind of a it's heavy. It's historical. When you look at it, if you acknowledge it, how do you call it? Critically, it's quite a dogmatic institution that carries a huge weight of problematics, while at the same time, Impossible Forms is the total opposite. It's something undefined, yet it's something to become. It's something that is in a constant refiguration, what it is and what it could be. And the name, Impossible Forms, was something that Chris was very much interested in, especially while looking at jazz. We studied jazz a little bit. How jazz, not all jazz, but how do you call it? Free jazz, improvisation. But you have the assembly. There is there is a set of order, but it's quite open to many things, new things to appear, and also. We were thinking about, now I don't remember, I have to finish, but I have this the last thing that I wrote. It's sad, but remember, it's 2017, and I think it's still relevant until today. My experience in these assemblies led to that I lost many good colleagues, close friends, and comrades. Many members left, including myself, and many new came. Many new members joined Third Space and also Museum of Impossible Form to maintain its resistance. I still write about the experience because I do believe that theorizing about this experience aesthetically, critically, is an agenda for radical cultural practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for this. And our last speaker is Sarah Waterfeld, and I'm quite sure you will have a slightly more positive view on the possibilities of collective interventions and assemblies. Sarah Waterfeld is an author and scholar of literature. She has taught classes on transmedial strategies of political interventions at the University of Potsdam. Her transmedial two-novel series Sex mit Gysi from 2015 and Was vom Humor übrig blieb 2016, both only in German, were a byproduct of her 2012 candidacy as the head of the German party Die Linke. She co-initiated B6112 and is a spokesperson for the collective Staub zu Glitzer, Dust to Glitter. The Berlin collective Staub zu Glitzer is best known for the occupation/transmedia performance B6112 at Volksbühne am Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz in Berlin. Since then they have participated in many other struggles and occupations in Berlin. And it's maybe important to say, for those who don't know the Volksbühne in Berlin, that this is probably the most iconic theater in Berlin. So it's not a theater at the margins, it's quite the opposite. It's really very much in the center of attention also, not only in Berlin Mitte, in the center of Berlin, but also in the center of media attention, etc. And after the very long, over 20-year directorship of Frank Kastorf, this theater got into quite some turmoil with new directorships and so on. And about this, Sarah will talk. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah. And thank you, Florian, for inviting me. And thank you all for listening to me. Today I want to talk about B6112. And B6112 is a transmedia theater staging. And it started at the 22nd of September in 2017 at the Volksbühne am Rosa-Luxemburg-Platz in Berlin. And because this transmedia piece of art is still not over yet, I also want to welcome you to our artwork, because this is a rabbit hole. That means it is an entry point to our story universe, and you're all welcome to participate now, today, and in the future. And at the same time, it's a teleological piece of art. That means we are doing all this for years now, for 4.5 years, for a goal. And the goal is to develop a new state theater model with a very large group of people within a performative and collective theater production. I would like to speak very briefly about the theory, because I know that many people are not interested in theater theory. So, this is just very short. So, transmedia. I don't know if transmedia theater is a thing in Norway. I mean, this is, I don't know. Is it? Okay. It was in 2011 at the book fair in Frankfurt, Germany, that a group of people came together and formulated a manifesto, the Transmedia Manifesto. And the manifesto consists of 11 very short theses and describes transmedia storytelling in general. For example, they say there's not a single narrative thread, but there's a whole story universe, and they say that anyone can participate, and it's not they're not readers or listeners or the audience anymore, but their experiences, and they can create the story themselves. And everyone who is participating can start a new narrative thread when they just relate to the title of, for example, of the whole thing. You can find this thesis at transmedia-manifest.com if you're interested. But for our collective, there's a big problem with this thesis, because the main question of these people was how to continue to earn money with storytelling in the digital age. And for us, this manifesto is not about emancipatory poetry, which we need in our society. For us, this manifesto is a complete neoliberal project, just to make this clear. I mean, we are related to this manifesto, but in the same time we criticize this. But I mean, it's just fair. It wasn't our idea or something. There were people who worked on transmedia ideas for many years. So, but anyway, we used these theses to create an emancipatory theater project based on a poetry of Mimesis 2.0. And I mean, I'm a scholar for literature, so I just say this one sentence, that we think this poetry is related to ideas of German early Romanticism, and to be concrete, to progressive universal poetry. So, all I want to say is that the whole occupation of the Volksbühne is an artwork. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't an occupation. We occupied the Volksbühne with an artwork. Maybe you saw the picture at the homepage of Meteor Festival, and you see the blue banner which says Doch Kunst. And doch Kunst means art after all in English. But doch at the same time is a very strong German word. I don't know if you know that. Doch is like one of the first words all children learn. When they start speaking, parents say no, and the child says doch, no, doch, no, doch. This is kind of a game all parents have to go through. So doch Kunst means really like, you know, we don't care what you will say, this is art. Because we knew people would say, come on. This is just, I know, some people running into a theater, they don't know anything about theater, they're not Kastorf, they're not Polish, and Derken, the director, he's the expert and so on. So, but what happened before? In 2015, the State Secretary for Culture announced, like out of the blue for many of us, that Chris Durkin, the director of the Modern Tate Gallery in London, will be the next director of the Volksbühne. The art scene, and to be precise, the socialist and communist, or at least the left art and theater scene, totally freaked out. They were like, are you fucking kidding me? Chris Durkin, the one from London, this neoliberal, I don't know, peep, you know, and he should take over the Volksbühne. I mean, are you crazy? And a war in German feuilleton started. And of course, there were many different opinions. I mean, there were the conservatives and the social democrats, and they said, yeah, wow, but this could be a chance for the city, you know? It's good for tourism, there would be many international artists, and I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He's a curator for so many years, and I don't know. And yeah, and I mean, and for others, it was just a catastrophe. And we know, of course, that the radical left perspective, and we are not only an artist collective or a free artist collective, we are an artist collective from the radical left, that our perspective is a minority perspective, of course. And, you know, I want to give you one example. There was this TV show, it's called at Arte, it's called Through the Night with, and they're always famous people, and so there was the show with Chris Durkin before he came to the Volksbühne, Through the Night with Chris Durkin, and he was sitting in the car and saying, yeah, you know what my secret is? My secret is that I'm chilling with the 1%, with the really rich people, you know, and they give me money so that I can support progressive artists. And I mean, we were sitting in front of and we were like, what? I mean, did he just say that? And I mean, this was really, I mean, this was an opinion that people said, yeah, you know, he knows so many people, he will bring money and he will finance art because we have financial problems in Berlin and there's so many artists, everyone's coming to Berlin, and so we need money and maybe he will organize it. But I mean, for us, it's just art washing, what he's doing. And he's still doing it. I mean, he's the head of the museums in Paris, of all national museums in Paris, and he's a millionaire. Okay, so in 2016, there was an open letter by over 170 employees of the Volksbühne, in which was just said they don't really want Chris Durkin to take over the house and so on, and nothing happened. And then in January 2017, we became part of the game. So at this moment, there was an occupation of the Institute for Social Sciences of the Humboldt University in Berlin. And that occupation, this is a long story, but that occupation took place because one of the most important scientists for gentrification and city development and fighter, of course, against gentrification from the left, André Holm, lost his job over a Stasi scandal. There was a story like when he was 18 years old, he signed a paper and he was member of the secret service of the GDR for 6 weeks, or I don't know what. It was just the Social Democrats came up with this because there was this new coalition in Berlin from 2016 between the Social Democrats, the Green Party, and the left, Die Linke. And yeah, and the Die Linke wanted André Holm to be the state secretary of city development, and the Social Democrats didn't want that. And so They came out with the story of his membership of the Secret Service, and he was fired. And he was also fired at the Humboldt University, and this is when that was the moment when students said, "No, we are going to occupy this place, and we want him to stay." And they won the fight. He got his job back. And at this time, some dramaturgs from the Volksbühne went to these occupying students and asked them if they could imagine to occupy the Volksbühne too for them, because they didn't. The whole house, or most of the people in the house, didn't want Chris Durkin to be the new director. Some of them wanted Kastorf to stay, others had other plans. There are many thousands of people involved in this whole story. So you will hear many different stories about this. But long story short, so the students, the occupiers, or some of them, said yes, we could imagine this. And up from that moment, meetings began in the Volksbühne. The first meetings for the occupation took place in the Volksbühne itself, with the staff, some technicians, some dramaturgs, authors, and so on. And students, artists, everyone could bring someone. And so my story was, I was in a club, and there was I didn't even know her. She was an author, and she came to me like, "Sarah, did you hear about the occupation of the Volksbühne?" I was like, "No, there will be an occupation. When? Where? Yeah, we have meetings in the Volksbühne. You should really come. That's so cool." And so on. I was like, "Okay, I'm in." Everybody in Berlin knew about this war. So I said, and I was searching for a new project for a new novel, because I just published my second novel and was searching for a new project. I thought, I love the Volksbühne. I went there for 20 years. My father took me there when I was 16, and I didn't understand anything, but I was thrilled. And since then, I went to the Volksbühne as an audience member. So my first meeting with these people was the 27th of March in 2017. And this was the day when the people of the Volksbühne said to us, "No, we changed our minds. Please don't occupy the Volksbühne. We don't want this anymore. I know we are talking now for 2 months, but maybe this could damage our careers, And the building, it's an historical building, and it's very expensive. And if anyone said, if there's just one single nail in the wrong wall, you're all going to jail, and this is very dangerous, and please don't come." And at the same day, we had a meeting in the evening, and I was like, "But we are still occupying or not? For what am I here?" And so we decided, okay, we keep on working. And we just thought, they will not fall in our bags when we come, or won't they, or will they? So we continued our meetings, and 1 or 2 weeks later, we decided that the whole intervention should be a piece of art. And the working title was just Performance, because we didn't talk much about the theory in the beginning, and we organized ourselves in working groups. And I was member of the working group called Cooperation, and our job was to swarm out into the city and talk to people. We talked to activists, scientists, politicians, political groups, tenants initiatives, Antifa groups, of course, artist collectives, theaters, filmmakers. We went to galleries, to hack spaces, to Küfer collectives. I don't know if you have Küfers here in Norway. I don't know the word in English. It's just a kitchen for all. So some people, it's about donations. Some people who are rich pay a lot, and others don't have to pay for the food. And it's about food sharing and so on. Yeah, we talked to club collectives, and because we had, that's already dying out, we had a huge and world famous club scene of the radical left in Berlin. And we also contacted journalists to work with them quite early in the process. And because transmedia also means that we need the mainstream media. We need to know how to play the media. We need to know how the mainstream media works and how to deal with this, and how to analyze, every day, the situation when we were in the house and so on. And in the end, around 3,000 people. I talked to most of them in person, so it was really hard work. I mean, we were standing up every day and swarming out and talking to people like every day for a month. So in the end, there were 3,000 people who said that they could imagine to show up and participate when the performance, like this was our working title, would start. And then it was the weekend of the German elections in 2017, and B60 112 started. And now I want to show you a short video so that you can have a little... okay, where's the other? Here. That you have a little impression of what happened there. You have to imagine we didn't use the big stage. We just used the two saloons, the foyers and the outdoor area. And it was just about self-organizing. We just said to the people, we don't say anything. We are not the curators. If you want to make this work, you have to work on it yourself. And so we had big plena with, I don't know, 300, 400, 500 people like every day. But immediately working groups were founded. And I mean, people just brought stuff. They brought techniques, they brought, I don't know, Musikinstrumente? What is the word in English? I'm sorry. Instruments, yeah. Okay. Yes. So, and what you will hear now, there's a voiceover in German, and this was the original speech of one of the members of the club collectives, which were our strongest partners, because he said in his speech, we will have a 96 hours rave up from now in the Red Saloon, so please come. And this was for us, I mean, it was good for us because there were thousands of people who want to go to the Volksbühne. And the police and also the politicians wouldn't evacuate. This was just the plan to have this rave. And also, I mean, they are our partners and they have problems with gentrification. So it was not only a strategy or something. The mainstream media was saying in the first days, like, yeah, they are left extremists and there's a lot of violence. We are all, I mean, when will the eviction start? Where's the police? Why does nobody does anything about this and so on? And then when they saw at the second or third day, they saw that, okay, maybe nobody believes in us because we came there with a security team, we had an awareness team, we had an awareness room, and I mean, we were really... we had a good, we were really prepared for what we did. And yeah, and also Chris Durkin was prepared because I met him at the 23rd of August, 4 weeks before, and I told him what is going to happen. And also the cultural senator, of course, knew what will happen. And Durkin was like, he didn't say no. He didn't say, don't come, or I will call the police or something like this. He said his press person, Johannes Ehmann, was with him. He said, like, oh, this sounds interesting. And you're right, gentrification is not that far in Berlin, and maybe you can save the city. And yeah, and do you know Paul Mason? Could you imagine to talk with Paul Mason on the big stage and things like, or do you know Alexander Kluge? I would really like to introduce you to Alexander. He's one of my best friends. And I was like, you know, Chris, even if I change sides now, I'm just a spokesperson. This will happen. So we have enough time now to think about how you are going to react. And he was like, okay, thank you for the talk. And he never called again or something. And so we were like, okay, this is kind of a contract or not? I mean, in Germany, you don't need the written contract. It's also you can have this verbal kind of contract. So, yeah, so we thought like, okay, this is going to work. And I mean, when we came, he was freaking out, and we had hard negotiations in the back office with the police, with the cultural senator, and he never came out and talked to the crowd. Not one day. The first time he showed up was when the eviction took place, after 6 days. And before that, he offered us the Green Saloon, and he said, you can have the Green Saloon, but there's one, Bedingung? One condition, no techno. And we were like, okay, this is not possible, but okay, we will discuss this in the huge plenum. And yeah, and then the next day we couldn't find a solution. There was no, we didn't vote for anything. And at the next morning at 9 o'clock, the police came. But this was also okay. I mean, they didn't fight us out or something. Chris Durkin was standing there and said, "You have 30 minutes to leave the house, and everyone who's still in the house after 30 minutes will be charged by the police, or I don't know, will have criminal charges." And there were 22 of them, and yeah, it was not a big deal. And then the next director came. His name is Klaus Dörr, and he had to step back over a Me Too scandal just this much, like 6 months ago. And of course, we had something to do with this. I mean, we initiated the whole complaint process of some of the women who suffered from his power abuse, and yeah. So what is the situation now? The new director is René Polish, and I would say we have a friendly relationship. Since May 2017, we meet, and there are still negotiations, or let's say conversations, about B6112. Yeah, and I mean, what we still want is to bring B6112, which is not over yet, which is still happening, back to the Volksbühne as we plan it. We want both of the saloons, we want the foyers and parts of the outer area, and we want to open the place for a self-organizing process for people who call themselves anti-racist, queer feminists, anti-capitalists, and people who are willing to think about how a socialist theater of the future could look like. We want transparency, of course. We want to document everything. We want to put protocols of meetings online, maybe translate them into different languages so that people from all over the world can participate. And the most important thing is that we are not curators. We are against the idea of curating at all. In Staub zu Glitzer, this was the idea would split or separate or don't exist anymore when we go back to the Volksbühne. We just want to be equals with other equal people, and yeah. So my last sentences. And at the end of B6112, there we were going to have a new state theater model, developed and tried and tested by self-organized, emancipated people who feel responsible for running the place in the future, the whole place. I mean, until that time, the program which is announced now can still, kann stattfinden? Can take place, yes, as it is planned. And of course, that would mean, because it is a teleological theater project, that in the end, René Polish will not be the director of the theater anymore. So this is kind of a heavy thing in the conversations. But we are still on it, and we are not giving up. And I hope that many other groups around the planet will follow us or adapt our artwork and do something similar and take over the big institutions for themselves. And yeah, and I hope also that maybe one day this Occupy Museums movement, why didn't they stay? I mean, maybe you can tell more about this, but why didn't they say, this is our place now and we are running this now? So, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And so, if everybody comes back, we have. I think we have. I mean, we are running slightly late, but we have maybe a small conversation amongst us and open for more questions, and then we see how long we can go. Yeah, so René Polish is not yet convinced to sign sign the contract where at the end he's not in charge anymore. But I think it's of course interesting in terms of the in a way, I see a certain similarity to the Occupy museums, which of course are in a different situation. In New York, I mean, you don't do this. The police is there and you're out of MoMA within half an hour. So the confrontation with the police was different. It also was interesting in this time, I think, to see what public sphere means. And actually, yeah, so anyway, it's a bit a different situation. But what I find maybe not the same, but a certain consequence out of also their thinking is they said, okay, we cannot talk to you because it will not lead to anything. And you, in a way, say, yeah, we can enter the process, but only if you go full on. So we are not going to do a lecture series in the Volksbühne to be integrated. So if we come, we want it all. Panels. Yeah, yes. So that's the thing. So before you come, basically, there has to be an agreement on the process to it. So I think I would say there's a similarity to that in a way. I don't know what maybe does one of you wants to react to each other in a way to your lectures, to your talks so far.
I want to react on Ahmed. Because I was thinking when I heard what you said that we would call this project places, and we had many of them in Berlin, in Kreuzberg, in Neukölln. So I mean, there were times that we had 3 project places in every street in Kreuzberg. And what happened? There were people like working there. Maybe they made a living out of it. They get funded and so on. And then gentrification began, and they all lost their places. And because they all had this small utopian, spheres. They are not organized in a whole. I mean, this is a problem that people are not organized. And I think this is just, I'm sorry to say that, but I really think that building up the small utopian places is wasting time. Because, I mean, we have to overcome capitalism. We have to overcome patriarchy and be very fast with this because of climate change and so on. So we really have to organize and be prepared for everything that is going to come. So, and this is when you said like, this is the first thing. And the second thing is that when you say it doesn't work out, it was so hard, there were different opinions and so on. And I think like when you say this is too hard to stand or something, then you give up democracy. This is what democracy is about. We have to talk and we have to find arguments against or for something all the time, and this is just living in my eyes.
You want me to respond? Yes. This works. Well, I'm not involved anymore in it, so, but no, I will respond. Okay, in terms of the second part, which is the what I mentioned as difficult situations. I intentionally wanted to talk about the difficult parts of working in collective or assemblies, because I think this part is always silenced or ignored or not highlighted. And this part is also exactly for the same reason that you mentioned. I brought it in. It's part of the radical democratic process, is that it's not always as portrayed. I mean, not always as dreamed that it could be. There is a lot of conflicts within these processes, and that's why I thought it's very important also to reflect on these conflicts, because these kind of arenas, I'm talking about now art spaces that has this radical democratic or radical openness, for me was an important experience is kind of rehearsing or practicing how do you call it? It was a learning process of practicing something different. So it kind of it was at the same time a political education through practice, As for gentrification, the first experience that I had, the experiment that I had with Third Space was actually located in an already gentrified space. So it was in the heart of the commercial center. And for the ones who stayed in that space, thought that it's very, very important to maintain such a space in such gentrification, like as a resistance to gentrification. It's important to have that space that offers place for marginal forms and people on the margins in the center. In the question of Museum of Impossible Forms, I didn't have time to talk about it. I was very much before, my idea was that I wanted to go to this suburb that was built in the 60s for migrant workers from the countryside to work in the city during the industrialization period of Finland after the Second World War. And the structure of the infrastructure there, the space is located in a mall that is built in the 70s. The mall is this old malls. Probably you have them here in Norway, or at least in Scandinavia. This kind of social democratic project where you have the library, the church, and youth center, and then you have a few shops which are the post and a bank and a kiosk and a grocery shop. But now it's not functioning anymore like that because of capitalism, etc. But the structure of the location cannot be gentrified because it's run out by nowadays immigrant-run shops. In the sense that it's not. There is very limited space for gentrification. It's a lot of details, and I think we don't have time to go through it. But I'm trying to say the architecture of these spaces would not allow gentrification unless they demolish it down, and this is what is gonna happen actually, and not because we have an art space over there, but because the city wants to generate a safe spaces with no junkies and alcoholics, and would like to build more social apartments for rent, cheaper rent. So, but they are negotiating with the space also, like what it could be to have something similar in the future, but still in the process. Yeah.
But it was, I think it's a very interesting story. I learned a lot about it because we had these heated discussions in Helsinki about is it gentrification or not, what you are actually doing when you go there. Yes. And you opened my eyes for how extremely bourgeois our imagination is. We have a very bourgeois imagination. We have two possibilities. One is city center, and the other one is the margins that are gentrified. But, we might not never go there, but there are many margins that are actually not gentrified. And they have a lot of economies there. And what I learned from you is that the rent in this shopping mall is higher than in the city center because there is a very specific economy for it. It's the economy that goes together with the immigration law. And as we know, the immigration law is based on the fact that if you open a shop, if you are an entrepreneur, it's much more likely that you can stay. This is why you will have a huge population of migrants who will be forced by the system to be entrepreneurs and who will need spaces where they will have shops, which of course are very expensive to rent. This is why the rent there, great economy, is higher than in the city center. And actually, just to think about that now for Germany, the reason, the whole NSU murders are related to this fact that there's a very specific relation between economy and immigration law that forces people into having shops. And then they have shops, and the terror was actually attacking the shops. So, talking about this, I think that your project was so interesting because it comes from another knowledge. It comes from another imagination than only the imagination city center gentrified margins. And the imagination of this is actually already, in the bad way, pre-enacting the gentrification, because these projects, they already happen because there is money that is actually already looking for and so on. But this was absolutely not the case in your case.
Yeah, I mean, when we were looking for a space, it was a time when there was a kind of a recession in that neighborhood, in that mall. And one of the space owners promised us a place, big space, something like that, for 1,500 euros a month, something like that. And we were waiting for a grant decision, that if we get it, we will rent it. The grant came 3 months after that we were getting that grant for a year. By that time, the space price went to 3,000. And I was quite shocked. I was like, what's going on? And he said, look, there's since 2015, there's so much, with the arrival of many refugees, asylum seekers, there was also, this is something is not talked about mostly in media, people brought money with them. And they were also consuming this money was also consumed and put into businesses. So they built authentic, let's say, Iraqi restaurants and grocery shops. And then, since now there is more of this kind of community, this community would rather come to eat here and go somewhere else. And the demand for a space was very high. So it's a gentrification, but a gentrification of a different, like, let's say, a group. And it was already gentrified, but from a totally, like, how do you call it, different imagination. And and that was difficult to explain to co-art, like friends and the art scene in Helsinki, that actually it's already gentrified. But you don't see it because you see it from the kind of a white, non-white, this kind of division. But it doesn't mean that if it's not Alvar Aalto design or well-structured restaurant, it doesn't mean that it's not gentrified. You just have to see it through this parallel economy, the flow of money that's happening all the time. Yeah.
No, actually, I also wanted to maybe bring the topic to something else. The question that I would have to all of us is yours, actually. You had the question, are curators and assemblies contradictions? I think, for me, this is an interesting question. I mean, also, it would be a question to you that you you are a curator of assemblies, no? Maybe we should discuss if this is a contradiction or not.
Well, it definitely is, but I think maybe to stick, because this is not, this I would not say curating assemblies. This is just a talk, but of course there are artistic assemblies happening which have curators, artists, and so on involved. It's also part of our conversation. I think most close to our discussion today would be probably the concept of artist organizations, which in a way is like the museums you were mentioning. There are many others examples in the last also 10 years. I mean before, of course, but there's a kind of a wave in the last 10 years of artists creating institutions as their artistic work. So not as a production body or whatever, but the artistic work is like the museum that an artist creates. The institution is the work. There are quite a few examples of schools, of academies, of research bodies, but also also other kind of institutions which are artist created. And there, of course, would be the question then in the next step, and there are very different examples. How inclusive are they? How much are they connected to the surrounding? The idea of curating in an open assembly, of course, is a bit absurd. But maybe what I think it's really A great choice of speakers. That your two examples are quite interesting in the way, I mean, in many ways, but I think like occupying the center and saying, no, we need the most representative stage available, and this is the place where we need to go, and working in the margins. And obviously there's a contradiction, but at the same time, I think for me, this would go very well together. And I think I quite like that you again also pointed out, because I sympathize with the idea of occupying small spaces. I mean, also I started in a collective some years ago, and we did this, and I would agree that the question is, would this lead to anything? And I like the approach to say, no, let's go to the big space. On the other hand, there are other economies, other backgrounds, and so on. So how they come together. So I would not see this as I mean, there are contradictions, but not as an absolute contradiction. The other thing is sustainability. You described it also, I think, like a representing many people having experience with collective work as very demanding and also kind of like sucking out energy. And you describe an example of learning also from a lot of activist strategies of organizing maybe in a different way, even so burnout is also a common thing among activists, so it's not preventing from that, but that how to make this sustainable beyond the self-made trying to build a collective and having all the experiences that come with it. So this would be maybe trying to link it together again to find out what are the ways of creating institutions that can be assemblies and collectives at the same time. This was not a question, but maybe you want to somebody who wants to pick it up.
Please don't get me wrong. I'm not against occupying small places. I'm absolutely pro-occupying everything. Supermarkets, PR agencies, and I don't care, police stations, everything. So this, okay. Because I just think when I look at Berlin and see all these small utopian places fail now, this makes me so sad. And this is also, there's also a potential in it, because these people are organizing now. They have this Deutsche Wohnen & Co. Enteignen, so they're, what is Enteignen in English?
Expropriate.
To expropriate big, Immobilien Unternehmen. Real estate, concerns and so on, companies. And I mean, there's a potential in all this, but there are also, I mean, there are people who just spend all their lives in these project rooms and they lost everything now, or they're losing. They're like small libraries and bookshops and everything, collectively run restaurants and everything. And I just think that this is not the solution for the future, to have these small places, because das Kapital is just stronger than these small places.
I think we need the question around institutions and institution change. I do think that and I think Chantal Mouffe also talks about it, that. In terms of political parties and change in democracy, is that there is a need for resistance, like protest and resistance, force on the ground to pressure the institution, but at the same time there is also a need for other, which I call parallel economies of production, to experimental, that could kind of explore other ways of doing things, and these parallel places contribute to the art field all the time. So they are not only opposing, but they are by critique and kind of whatever you call it, decolonize, how do you call it, deconstruct or do things differently, de-link. They also contribute, while criticizing, they contribute something new to the art. And these two forces are required. The occupation or the protest, and also the kind of experimental and imagination. And they go along. Now, I kind of I mean, I'm sad. I had to push myself out, or I burned myself out, or I made everybody angry at me. I'm really sad about it, and it's very emotional. And also, kind of, I was left out of, self-victimization. How do you call it? Like I kind of like I left without like how can I describe? I cannot describe in my a professional biography, how do you call it, like bio or something, that I was the one who was after all of that. You know, I cannot claim it. Part of this project is like you cannot claim it, or if you claim it, this is an opportunity. People will hate you. You will have a lot of enemies, more enemies than you have now. But what I kind of was left with is that I can see that many of us who were involved have their own. It was like their own careers going on. It opened spaces. It opened discourse, other discourse, and it opened also other venues in the institution. So it's and whenever we were invited in the institution, we like in Documenta now, we kind of wanted to push it more to the limits. So when me and Chris had to write our thesis, we decided to write it together as a kind of a collective writing. And also it wasn't that easy in the beginning for the institution to explore it. When the institution invited us to curate something, we would take it to the extreme. So they opened boundaries for more people to come to share it with us. And of course, this can turn against the whole project. It can the out result is not probably aesthetically amusing, but the whole idea of pushing the limits within the institution is something that we also kind of try to do.
Brut, New Art on Stage.